It's a great pleasure for me to be here. Inspiring a group of scientists on an early Monday morning is a big task. So I scratched my head for a while. And what I've decided to do is to ask 3 questions, explore them a bit in order to set some context for it, and eventually to try and give an answer. Now, this comes with a cautionary note. I'm sure that pretty much for every issue I bring up, there is an expert in the room that knows much better than me what the answer is. So let me take you on an explorative talk. And I suggest that you, while I'm talking, you think about your project and how this may relate to your project, what I'm suggesting. There is going to be, this is just an alert, there's going to be about 20 minutes in a moment where I'm going to ask you to reflect about what has been said. So making some notes may be useful. So as I said, I'll ask them 3 questions and then come up with an answer. The first question I'd like to ask is really, if you take a step back, what is the role of sustainability research in Switzerland? Why are we doing all of this? And my question to you is, when you think of Switzerland, what is special about Switzerland? What comes to mind as you see this? Or as you have ideas, what do you see? Where is Switzerland unique or different? Any ideas? We have a relatively balanced economy. We are water rich, intense in agriculture. We have a relatively stable government and economic system. We are an alpine region, as something that we are certainly very aware of these days with all the snowfall that we have right now. An aware consumer base that is relatively unique about, not only about Switzerland, but a whole bunch of countries. I'd say we we have a high density population, functioning democracy, and we are particularly strong in our overviews of CO2, of our carbon footprint. So these are some ideas that come to mind for me when I think about Switzerland. You may have others. My question with this was really to say, imagine we could balance these. We could kind of prioritize these and say, what of these issues are most burning for Switzerland? And therefore, your research projects, which of your research projects are addressing the burning issues in Switzerland? And which of your research projects are kind of celebrating where Switzerland is already quite advanced and can be scaled internationally, where internationally there is still room to grow? So maybe as you look at this, think of where your research project may stand. Barbara had asked me to briefly introduce the gap frame a little bit. For those of you who are not familiar with the gap frame, it is a normative framework that was built on the SDGs and augmented and amended a little bit, particularly in the area of finance, national public finance and governance. And what this does, it makes the issues in the 4 dimensions of environment, society, economy, and governance comparable. And it does that by measuring each issue on a normative scale of saying, where is Switzerland as compared to an ideal state? So we are not comparing Switzerland to the best country, we're comparing Switzerland to where the ideal measure may be. And this allows us to actually determine priorities for a country or for a region or for the world. I've picked Switzerland because that's the topic that we have today. And what we are seeing is actually the burning issues for Switzerland. The darker, the more the center, the worse. 10 would be ideal. What we're aiming for is the green space, a safe space. Our claim is to say that if all countries were in the green space, we would be living in a world that is safe for all of us. So where can Switzerland contribute most to this safe space for all of us? The carbon quotient, which is the comparison of our CO2 use versus the capacity we have giving our intense agriculture, fishery, and forestry activities. Oceans has a lot to do with our output from agriculture. Phosphorus is one of the measures here. Biodiversity, you see equal opportunity, clean energy. Sustainable consumption is one of the things we've done with the SDGs. We've broken sustainable consumption and production in two parts. And particularly for Switzerland, this is interesting. As you can see, point 18, sustainable production, we're actually pretty good in terms of we are where we're doing a good job. But our sustainable consumption is where the work is to be. So, where would your projects be on here? I've done a superficial analysis, and forgive me if I place your projects wrongly. I've torn apart the gorgeous sheet that, let's see whether this comes up, Barbara has done, and I massacred it over the screen. And I don't know whether you can read it or not. You can certainly have this slide afterwards. And I've been trying to see where do these projects contribute and where may there be some gaps and opportunities. And I'm not going to go into the details here, and you know your projects much better anyway, but I was trying to illustrate where we are. And what comes out here is that we're covering many of the issues. Some of the issues that we're covering, there are some super projects, and I shouldn't actually pick out any, but I'm really impressed with the sustainable finance projects, for example, where we can see that actually Switzerland, by comparison, is doing relatively well. I'm not trying to say we're perfect, but we're, as compared to where other burning issues are, we're doing relatively well. So this may be an area where we can pioneer and scale our research results internationally, whereas we have other projects in the sustainable consumption area where really we've got the research results will need to serve Switzerland so that we can do much better in Switzerland as well. So these are some ideas for you to think about. As you can see, I couldn't see any projects, and I may be wrong, in the area of biodiversity, clean energy, equal opportunity, and I've highlighted where we but these are burning issues for Switzerland. So maybe some of your projects may have unintended or intended positive consequences on the issue of biodiversity, clean energy, or equal opportunity that would really serve Switzerland, because these are burning issues for Switzerland. So some ideas for how you could contribute more to Switzerland. So if I go back to this first question and say, so what is the role of sustainability research in Switzerland? I'm coming up with three challenges that I'm kind of putting in the room. One is to say, how about if we would be focusing on pioneering in the issues that you are working on where we are leading already? Focus on innovation where urgent action is needed and required in terms of what Switzerland really needs as outputs, and scaling where we notice that there are international urgencies for issues where we are already pretty good at, but that are really needed internationally. The gap frame is publicly available, all data is for free, so you could check in which countries your issues may be of a particular urgency, and you could therefore see where you would have communication or dissemination in these countries where the issues are burning. All right, so this as a first question. The second question I'd like to ask is to say, so how do we ensure relevance of our sustainability research? And that's a bigger question and a quite difficult question to address, as we all know, as I'm sure you've looked at your projects and how you can make them relevant. And here, what I'd like to point to is kind of what has grown as a current reality internationally. What do you see here? One of the things that we see is that policy is made, of course, still nationally, but also increasingly internationally through networks, alliances, and associations beyond the government regulations that are there. We have often practice-led initiatives that are resulting in soft law that eventually business will respond to. They are initiated through consultancies or businesses. The World Business Council of Sustainable Development is a good example. Think of the roundtables on forests and fisheries. Think of the process of how integrated reporting came about. the industry materiality standards by SASB, the Paris Climate Agreement, or the Ellen MacArthur Foundation on Circular Economy that came up with the standard. These are new ways of how policy gets influenced and enacted. And my question to you is really, what does that mean for your project, where you have an output in 3 to 5 years? How can you make sure that you can influence these ongoing international emerging network association and initiatives timely with your output of your research, so that you can influence where it matters? You had one of the slides up there where the knowledge dissemination came in relatively late. You'll see that my suggestion will be to start with this dissemination much earlier on, even before you have the results out there, so you can actually embed and build in stakeholders that you're trying to influence early on. Now, as we look at the gap frame again, what I'm pulling out here is the comparison of the Swiss map with the international map. And this is to kind of show you the difference of where Switzerland has its issues that I've illustrated before, and where internationally we have some issues. What I've added on top are the measures for the four dimensions: planet, society, economy, governance. You can see for Switzerland pretty clearly our issue has to do with the environment, or what we call planet. Globally, all the factors or all the 4 dimensions are in red, with, interestingly enough, probably not surprisingly enough, governance being the biggest issue that is most burning. You can see there all the issues that are either a threat or at a critical state, threat being black, critical red. And my invitation to you would be, here I haven't done the exercise of allocating your projects. The invitation would be to say, where do we have contributions to global issues? We could pull this up also for Western Europe or for any other region, but where do you have a key output of your research projects that can truly help and make a difference and push ahead? And there you can see, in terms of all the governance issues, where some really big issues are, and others, of course, as well. You see 3 areas in yellow where we have missing data globally. We don't have enough data to actually know yet what the state of the world is. In terms of, if I would have to frame this as challenges, I will come up with the following 3 points. How can we ensure that our research influences ongoing and in many ways parallel practice-led initiatives in time? Are the relevant stakeholders on board? Can you build them in, embed them, involve them in your projects? How can we ensure that our output is relevant in 3 or 5 years when you are done, in such a fast-changing context that we are involved in right now? And thirdly, how can we adapt? And this is probably challenging mostly to the program management. What are options to adapt research and output midway as we are discovering either findings or a changing international context? And that becomes really challenging. So just putting it out here as well. I'm not trying to say I have a solution for it, but that may be considered as well. And I think your annual meetings are going to be of great help for this. This brings me to the third question. How do we achieve impact with sustainability research? I would say by definition, sustainability research must contribute to business, society, and policy making. It's a normative statement I'm making. However, our kind of research, and there is a bit of a perception gap I'm arguing here, of what we think is applied and what business may think of what we do. And I would suggest that we think we do applied research, but business considers applied research the work of what integrated reporting is doing or McKinsey is doing. That is applied for them. And often we are quite a way away from what practice considers applied. So that's a challenge for us. And I love the fact that there are media courses and communication courses that are available, because we have a lot to learn in terms of how we communicate our research. And I think it's got to do with both communication and involvement of stakeholders. If you look at how the integrated reporting process was done from an involvement with stakeholders, it's a pretty impressive process in terms of how they have gotten to their result. Heard of the Responsible Research in Business and Management initiative? Anybody? It's a pretty much brand new initiative that just got launched in January. A few days ago, the website opened. What is behind this is that a number of prominent editors of major journals, scholars, some deans from business schools have gotten involved into saying, we need to recorrect where research has gone wrong. And we often, in scholars and in my conversations with fellow deans, had often this conversation of, to what degree are citation criteria, for example, the only relevant thing in promotion and in appointment of faculty? What other elements would be in there? So this initiative, rrbm.network, looks at a whole bunch of things, and it comes up with 7 principles that are kind of the underlying principles for research. And I'd like to highlight a few of them that relate to this second challenge. Service to society is defined by them of saying it is about developing knowledge that benefits business and the broader society, both locally and globally, ultimately for the purpose of creating a better world. And to what degree are we really doing that? The second principle on stakeholder involvement looks at research that engages different stakeholders in the research process without, of course, compromising the independence of inquiry. The third principle, impact on stakeholders, defines research that has an impact on diverse stakeholders, especially research that contributes to a better business and a better world. Then principle number 4, valuing both basic and applied contributions, suggests that the applied domains address urgent burning issues as a priority. And then the last principle, the 7th, broad dissemination, looks at really encouraging all the diversity of forms of dissemination beyond what is classically and traditionally done. There's a way of endorsing this, or there's a way of reading more about it. The website has a lot of inspiring ideas of how to do that, and has a position paper that is now getting circulated, presented. There are special issues offered by a lot of the Academy of Management journals that are trying to encourage research that addresses these principles. So, the challenges that come out from this question is really, on one hand, the need to understand how is change actually achieved, the need to co-create and test insights with practice, the importance of sharing and reviewing intermediate results in interactive sessions, using feedback as a way to go forward, and the option to adopt the output midway. Answer attempt. This is my attempt to try and pass on something, and before I do that, I'd like you to reflect a little bit. I'm using the insight from Andy Hoffman, who's written this his book on how culture shapes the climate debates a couple of years back, and his insight really is that more knowledge doesn't change minds. And we see that in politics internationally too frequently, I would say. And what does that mean for us? That's really a challenge. And I think my answer attempt has a lot to do with that somehow the importance is in an inclusive and adaptive research process. And let me talk to you a little bit about that. I'm gonna first pull that slide up, which is basically a summary of what I've said before. I'm pulling up the 3 questions and the highlights for each of these points that hopefully guide a little bit the answer of this. And what I suggest to do is that you take now a moment and you look at what might this mean for your project. And we're not going to share it, so you can do it at your own leisure, individually or in small groups. And what I would suggest is that you look, for example, at the first issue, and you ask yourself, is the issue that my project is addressing, is that an issue that Switzerland is leading in? Is this an issue we are already pretty good? Is it a burning issue for Switzerland where we need urgent improvements in Switzerland? Or is it actually a burning issue globally? Where would you place it? 1, 2, 3, where is the priority? For the second issue, or for my second question in red, my question would be, what are local or international developments in the area of your issue? What are coalitions, soft law? What is going on? What is emerging? What are you aware of? And to what degree have you embedded the relevant players in your research projects? Could you or should you do that? What comes to mind as you think about that? And in the third question, my invitation would be to say, as you look at strengthening co-creation, how can you do that with your existing partners? All of you work with business, most of you work with businesses and external parties already. How can you make sure that they are included in an ongoing way in your research design, both now, midterm, and later on? How, and this is a question that you're doing here, that you're looking at here, how can you work with other NRP 73 projects? What are obvious or less obvious links that you may be able to benefit from, both in Switzerland and internationally? And third, where do you see the challenges or opportunities to adopting your research and outputs dynamically along the way? Before leaving you with just questions that are difficult questions, that I'm happy I don't have to answer. I would like to leave you with my suggestions for whatever they're worth out of my experience. I really believe that somehow the secret lies in the process, and I know that that is not necessarily a comfortable answer. And I've defined, I summarized my suggestions as I reflected on these three questions with these 7 points. Purpose focus for me really means an invitation as you go through the process, maybe on an annual basis, doesn't need to be something that is too regularly done, is to verify again and again, is this project and truly serving society, and how? Just remind yourself of that question and maybe sharpen the focus through that. Keep it dynamic, integrate new developments. Why not embracing an action research standpoint whereby you acknowledge that you are actually a subjective partner in research rather than an objective observer? And I know that's a bit of a challenge, and I think you just put it out there. Inclusive. How can you work with stakeholders and intended recipients so that you wish to influence? How can you build them in? Co-creative. How to be truly applied from your user perspective. Who is your user that you intend, and how would he or she or they define what you do as truly applied? And that probably involves integrating feedback in the process. Impact-oriented. Are you truly influencing those who matter and when it matters from a timely perspective? That's that challenging, continuously evolving perspective of soft law and international regulations that are difficult to keep up with. And then ongoing dissemination. I would suggest that you start sharing with your intended audience from the very start. Simply letting them know that you're working on a question is hugely important without you having any insights to share yet. And then being open about receiving feedback on it and finding a way to integrate them will help you, will be probably the best way of communicating and kind of selling your research findings to them, because they will feel that they co-own it if you work with them early on. And then adaptive output. It's probably the most challenging thing, and challenging for the program as well. How can you negotiate and agree on the value of improving the output definition along the way in a changing context? And that will need some flexibility from the program management as well, probably in service of the ultimate project that you have and of the program. Yeah, so that would be my suggestions for your program, for your projects overall and together. So my conclusion just basically is one slide, and you've got Barbara here, who is your process coach. You're super lucky. I don't know a better person who could be doing this than Barbara. And one way that we know things are going is never quite as planned. It's an adaptive journey. So have the courage to review and adapt the process and the outcome as needed, together with your process coach, in your teams, with your partners, with the program. You've got a fantastic support team here, and I hope that these small 30 minutes were a way to take you a little bit away from your project into a different mind frame. And yeah, I'd like to close with this. If anybody would like to have any more information, I'm just an email or a social media click away. Thank you.